Tracking our first measurable widespread fall rain, plus the brewing blob in the Pacific, and we're officially on La Niña watch. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods. Let's get right to it. The changes are on the horizon. A low pressure system diving out of the Gulf of Alaska is going to bring us what looks like our first measurable rainfall really throughout much of Northern California. But what a wild start to fall it's been. We had a lightning show at the end of our first week of fall, and you can see it was streaming over much of the Central Valley, really lighting up the nighttime sky. But get this, that was followed up with another light show.
A meteor came? Oh my God!
Which looks like it was likely space junk over the hills of California, mainly over the Sierra foothills and for the East Valley communities. Oddly enough, there was a SpaceX launch later that evening, but the timing didn't align. So it looks like just based on the duration of those lights, it was likely space junk just kind of reigniting once it reached our atmosphere. A little closer to home, though, we had a dust devil. Yeah, getting back to terrestrial conditions. Dust devil in Placer County. You can see the spin right there, and the Tahoe National Forest saying that indeed they were getting reports as well and kind of confirming that that's indeed what happened there. Some video just kind of shows the rotation of that dust devil over Placer County. And now we're going to get even more active weather by early next week. So we've been tracking it all. Now the weekend does look quite nice. Apple Hill, if you're headed up that way, temperatures in the 80s on Saturday, 70s on Sunday. So a little bit cooler, kind of getting us a taste of those changes to come. But they're going to be much more wide scale changes in the offing. A little bit higher up, not necessarily in the foothills, but we're talking some of the higher elevations. We're getting some of the fall color peeking through. This is Sage Hen Summit. This is closer to 395. Up near Mono County. So again, some of those aspens starting to get that beautiful golden glow. We're a little bit early in the game for much of the fall color to be moving into the valley and the foothills, but it happens so quickly, especially once we get some of those colder overnight lows. So keep your eye on this because it will change rather rapidly. But right now, that average peak color generally favors early October, mid-October, even late September for the higher elevations. And then it migrates its way down throughout the valley and the foothills about 500 to 1,000 feet pretty quickly once things start to get going. So just be aware of keeping your eye on that fall color here, especially with a little cold pocket of air coming through. As far as our severe weather outlook over the weekend, it's mostly going to be south of Highway 50, again, where we saw some of that beautiful fall color right here towards Yosemite and then east of the crest. We'll see it pretty similar for our Sunday forecast. It's around that departing low that brought us that lightning show at the end of the week. As that starts to move into the Great Basin, still a little bit of convection and instability associated with that. I know we're all kind of itching to get the rainy season going after over 180 days without measurable rain in Sacramento, totaling over 1/10 of an inch. Now, we've seen a little here and there. In fact, on Thursday, we saw 2/100ths of an inch of rain, but really that was just enough to get everything kind of wet and really didn't do too much of anything. Just some spots on the ground was about it. We are almost at the end of our water year. We're just days away of actually closing out the 2025 water year. And you can see we've now headed past the monsoon, the heat, and here's the end of the water year, September 30th. We just closed the books on everything that was since October 1st of last year, when our rain really starts to get going, October, November, and then it really ramps up in December. Here's where we sit with our drought monitor. I think you're going to be really pleased. We've seen a couple of tropical systems move our way, particularly impacting Southern California. So the area that I want you to focus on is right here, right along the eastern border. And we had extreme drought starting to brew, and now we're starting to see that erode. Just some wetting rain moving through Southern California. A little bit goes a long way this time of year. As far as Northern California, abnormally dry, but nothing too much to be concerned with. Keep in mind, when we look at the drought monitor, especially for California, it's not just sheer precipitation numbers because we store our water so differently. It's in reservoirs, groundwater, streams, creeks. We have a lot of different storage capacities here in the state. And so in terms of our water supply, it's not just pure precipitation. In terms of those numbers, you can see most of us actually are going to round out this year with a deficit, very likely, unless we just get a huge deluge of rain coming in. But It doesn't look like that for areas south of I-80, where we're looking at some of those bigger deficits. Santa Barbara almost 10 inches behind what we would normally see at the end of the water year, whereas the Northwest, as well as parts of the north end of the valley, they're probably going to end up pretty good. And we're going to actually add to it as well early next week. Major reservoir supplies. This is what I was talking about. We really haven't checked in too much over the past couple of weeks, simply because they just don't change that much. But as we start to end our water year, did want to give you an update on this. And we're still looking great, despite the fact that I just showed you some numbers that were below average. When we talk about storage capacity, if the snowpack is really good in the Sierra, which it was this past season, that snowmelt helps to fill our reservoirs, and water managers kind of keep as much as they can when we need it during the dry season, which we're just on the tail end of that right now as well. So most of us are above average for that capacity. Folsom at about 90% of average. That's still really good for this time of year. Heading into the Central Valley, again, above average capacity. And in terms of how much is in the tank there, we're at about 50 to 80% full. But this time of year, they really start to get these reservoirs emptied as much as possible to make way for the incoming rainy season. So this is what Shasta looks like. If you're out and about, you're still going to see a little bit of that ring, kind of the bathtub ring, if you will, where we saw the highest water levels and then they start to go down. So Shasta, again, capacity at 4.5 million acre feet. That's a lot of water to hold for California. Lake Oroville also a bit above capacity, our average capacity right here. We're at 2.1 million acre feet. And then Folsom, it's a smaller one, but it does feed the metropolitan area of Sacramento. So we take a look at that. And as you can see, the capacity is about a million acre feet, a little bit below that. And right now we're at about half full. So if you go out to any of the reservoirs over the weekend, you are going to see them a little bit lower. Totally how it should be. So our low pressure system that brought us the lightning moving off to the east, high pressure briefly building in, and then it quickly loses the control of our weather as that low starts to move in. By Monday afternoon and evening, we're looking at a pretty good batch of moisture moving through, and that will continue kind of on and off into our Tuesday forecast. There's one little catch here. The models have a really difficult time kind of getting a grasp of that first rain event and how the atmosphere will respond. So we just wanted to put that out there in terms of how much rain we'll actually get and what kind of path this will take. The first one, and if you've lived in California long enough, it's kind of difficult to bust through all of that dry air that's been sitting over us for all intents and purposes since the end of March. But the average monthly rainfall starts to go up as the atmosphere starts to become more primed. You can see how these numbers on average start to climb through December, January, and February, where we get 50% of our annual rainfall. So we're still a ways off from really seeing the robust part of our season. But again, we get kind of excited on this first one because it's the beginning of what's to come. Our futurecast rainfall totals, when we take a look at generally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're going to see, again, I talked about that I-80 line. Here it is, roughly from San Francisco through Sacramento and then the north end of Lake Tahoe. We're going to pick up anywhere from about a quarter of an inch to a half an inch, almost an inch of rain, slightly higher totals there along the northwest coast. So something to be aware of. And in fact, we are looking at the potential for heavier precipitation. This is from the Weather Prediction Center, kind of putting northwest California through the north end of the valley and even towards parts of the northern Sierra in more of that heavier precipitation zone than, say, even closer to I-80. That's where the focus of the energy looks like it will be right now. Moisture tracker, this is pretty much on par as well. What you're going to want to look at is kind of the brighter turquoise color here. Here's that line that we were tracking right here. This looks like it's going to come in with one wave, and then there's another one right behind it. So this one has a little bit more of a southerly fetch to it, but reinforcing the potential of some of that moisture coming through into our early Wednesday forecast before we start to really dry out. And it looks like we could be heading into a much warmer and drier period on the heels of this. All right, I talked about the blob. So this is a look across the Pacific. Let me orient you just for a second, because I know these are slightly different maps than what we normally look at. Here's California right here, and then you can see Baja, and then, of course, we head into Central America and South America right there. Up here, all the way into Asia, we have unusually warm water temperatures. We're talking 2 to 5 degrees Celsius above average. At one point, it was the warmest that they had been tracking ever. They've scaled back a little bit, but this is the area right here that I wanted you to look at. And it's quite warm. This potentially has been enhancing some of the tropical nature of the storms that we've been seeing as of late. But the other focus area that I wanted you to focus on right now is just to the south of this. And this is the unusually cold water in the Niña region. And that is why NOAA is looking at that particular area for unusually cold water, which would put us in a La Nina phase. So these are kind of the predictions that we have right now in terms of, okay, when is this going to peak? We're kind of seeing this developing right now. Looks like October, November, December through possibly into February. That's going to mainly reach that threshold of getting us into a weak La Nina. This does not look like it's going to be anything super strong. That being said, that doesn't mean much for California. And again, here's a look at NOAA's prediction, and you can see kind of in the blue here, La Nina. Well, we're kind of in that neutral phase right now, moving into more of that weak phase, and it looks like it's going to kind of fizzle by the time we get to end of February. January, February is about the time that we start to see that fizzle, which is, by the way, 2 of our wettest months of the year for California. Again, I said, that being said, because when you look at the statistical averages of precipitation on La Nina events, weak La Nina events, there's not much of a signal. It kind of can go either way, near to slightly above average for Northern California and near to slightly below average for Southern California. So it's pretty much neutral. It could go any way when we look at those weak La Nina events. We'll be watching it, though, of course, as we head through the season. Now, I did mention briefly that our 8 to 14-day climate outlook, once we get through this precipitation event coming through early next week, we head into what appears to be a much likely warmer scenario for the first week of October and much drier. What does that mean for fire conditions? This always elevates our concerns slightly when we haven't really seen the end of our peak fire season with a big, huge, heavy rain just really helping those fuels to tamp down. It's something that is on my radar to watch in terms of those fire concerns by the first week of October. So a lot in play here for Northern and Central California moving into the first weeks or so of fall. Highs in the meantime for our Saturday forecast, kicking off that first weekend of fall. We're in the 70s for the high country, 80s to near 90 down the hill as we move towards Yosemite. Again, it's been quite active with thunderstorms. We've got some beautiful colors through parts of this region. So if you're headed up that way, just be aware of the potential of thunderstorms, but also enjoy the beautiful hikes and everything that's going on this time of year. 90s in the valley, so a little taste of summer heat, nothing too extreme, but certainly on the warmer side. We're in the 60s along the central coast as we head into inland areas. We're in the 90s, take it towards the Bay Area. Highs are going to be on the cool side in the 60s, a nice refreshing start to the weekend. 80s inland, so again, we are starting to see a little turn after some warm temperatures on Friday, back to some more fall conditions. 60s along the northwest coast. We're in the 90s for the north end of the valley, where we expect to see some of the biggest precipitation coming in early next week. Capital region, we're in the 80s to near 90 for the first day of our first weekend of fall. Our weekend forecast for this year, just keep your eye to the sky there, especially with any of the thunderstorm risk, and then we'll start to actually see that become much more widespread by early next week. That will be true as well for our foothill forecast and for the coast. Rain expected as well by early next week. So moving on to our extended forecast, we have a weather impact alert in place on Monday for the pretty significant changes that we're expecting, with the first widespread rain event of the season coming into play. Highs will drop into the 70s, and then, like I said, we dry out and start to warm up. Nothing too extreme yet, but we'll be watching for anything on the back edge of this weather event to elevate those fire concerns.